I'm Jordan.
And I'm Alyssa, and this is Leave It to the Pros, a new book series where we discuss books with ties to Virginia. So join us as we dive right into Bridge to Terabithia, but don't fall in because that didn't work out for Leslie.
But we'll talk about that
But
next.
we'll get into it. We're gonna get into it.
So, this month we're discussing the book Bridge to Terabithia by Katherine Paterson. The story follows two main characters, a young boy named Jess and a girl named Leslie. And in the story, we get to know these two characters and their families a little bit. Jess is the only boy in his family. He lives with his parents and he has 4 sisters on a farm in Lark Creek, Virginia. Jess is introduced to Leslie when she moves with her parents from Alexandria, Virginia, and she becomes Jess's best friend and next door neighbor.
At school, Jess is more of a loner. He's having a very hard time fitting in, and because Leslie is new to the area, she also doesn't have a lot of friends either. Because of this, he and Leslie are able to form a tight bond as they go through the school year together. As the two of them become closer, Leslie suggests that they find a place just for the two of them so that they can escape their real-life problems. The place that they find is an abandoned treehouse in the woods on the other side of the creek. They use their imaginations to create a kingdom called Terabithia. Jess and Leslie then deem themselves the king and queen of Terabithia, and they spend their after-school evenings governing their people.
As the school year goes on, Jess and Leslie become closer, and they are soon best friends. Jess shares his love for art with Leslie, and she tells him all about her life before Lark Creek. For Christmas, the two are really excited, and then they start to get each other Christmas gifts.
Aww.
Jess gives Leslie a puppy, and they name the puppy Prince Terrian, and he's the guardian of Terabithia. And Leslie gives Jess a watercolor set and heavy art paper. The book starts to come to an end on the day that Jess's favorite art teacher, Miss Edmonds, invites him to DC for a day trip visiting the art museums. As she drops him off at home, he's really excited, recalling the best day of his life when...
Unfortunately, this was short-lived sentiment as he then came home. His family and friends had to break the news to him that his best friend Leslie had passed away. Ugh. It turned out that she tried to cross the creek into Terabithia while he was away, and the rope that they used to swing across snapped, causing her to fall into a rapid current of the creek. So sorry, Leslie. Jess is faced with the immense feelings of loss and grief. He goes into denial for quite a bit and has a hard time understanding why his friend left him there alone. Leslie's family and even the people at school who used to make life a little bit hard for him show support for him and Leslie's family as they go through their grief together.
At the end of the book, Leslie's family moves back out of Lark Creek. They give Jess some of Leslie's things, including her art supplies, as well as some scrap wood. Jess uses that scrap wood to create a sturdier bridge to Terabithia, where he takes one of his little sisters to carry on the legacy of the land that he and Leslie created together. The town of Lark Creek is, of course, a fictional place. However, Alexandria, where Leslie grew up, is indeed a real part of Virginia. So, for the next part of our discussion, we're going to take a trip up to Alexandria, Virginia. Are you ready?
I'm very ready.
Let's strap in.
What was that?
I'm strapping in. Thank you, safety first.
So am I driving?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a passenger princess.
I always have to drive.
Passenger princess, it's in the title.
Let's go, Jordan.
Okay. We're here at Glen Carlin Park in Alexandria, Virginia, where Leslie in the story had her origins. But do you know where the name Terabithia originates from?
Where does it originate, Jordan?
So the name Terabithia in the book is referred to by them talking about C.S. Lewis's books, The Chronicles of Narnia.
Ooh.
In his books, he's talking about an island called Terabithia. And C.S. Lewis uses a lot of biblical allegory in his stories.
Yeah.
And he's referring to trees in the Bible that are called terebinth trees.
Yeah.
They symbolize power and strength and were often used by Israel as landmarks for memorials to the dead, which I feel like, unfortunately adds a little bit more to the understanding of the title of the book, Bridge to Terabithia, once you understand what happens to Leslie in the end of the book, unfortunately.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
It is. I think it adds another level to the story, if you ask me.
Kind of going off of the theme of grief, the cycle of life is also a really big part of the book, where we see them sort of like trying to figure out their lives as young adults and like young children, whether it's like growing up and dealing with friendships and going through friendships and different kinds of relationships. So the cycle of life is also very prominent in the theme, but so is the theme of friendship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that, like, kind of how you were talking about trying to figure themselves out.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of that friendship
aspect.
Yeah.
Like they both were kind of oddballs out.
Very much so.
Jesse didn't have a lot of friends. He felt kind of not neglected, but he felt a little bit outcast,
Yeah.
I think, in school. And he also was feeling that at home, being the only boy.
Yeah.
And so going from home where he's feeling a little bit alone to school where he's also feeling alone, it was a lot of things to deal with. So when he met Leslie and she became a part of his life, I feel like that really changed things for him.
Absolutely. I really admire Jess for his persistence, and granted he's like a child, so what more can you do? But the way that he created these spaces for himself, whether it's Terabithia or through his creativity. Creativity, as we see throughout the book, is a really, really strong theme. Jess loved to draw. In fact, he was always known for drawing. It was either he was running or drawing or running, or if he had the time, he might have done both.
Yeah.
So creativity is a huge part of this book, and we see him like drawing through different phases of his life as well.
Yeah, I think creativity was a big aspect of this story. If it wasn't the physical creativity of painting and drawing that Jess was doing, it was also through their imagination, like creating an entire world like Terabithia. That's a lot of creativity, and I think both Jesse and Leslie had a lot of creativity that showed up in a lot of different ways, and I really enjoyed seeing that.
So Jordan, with creativity being such an integral part of the book, do you know what we're doing next?
No, what are we doing next?
We're taking an art class!
An art class?
An art class.
I had no idea.
Not a clue.
None.
None.
Absolutely none.
Well, we're taking an art class, and I'm really, really excited to be whimsical and theatrical and get messy. What are you excited for?
I'm excited to win because this is going to be a competition, and I'm going to win.
Wow. I don't really know how to feel about that. I thought that we were becoming friends because friendship is such an integral part of the book.
I have plenty of friends that I win
Tread
against like
lightly.
all the time.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. I'm
And
listening.
you can be the next one.
Let's grab our paintbrushes and our smocks and all of our fun things, and I will see you at the finish line, and you're going to be behind me.
Me personally, I start at the end. So
Okay, J.K. Rowling. I open at the close. In the book Bridge to Terabithia, Jesse was always known for art. He was always painting, always drawing, always doing something artistic and something creative. So today we're going to be taking an art class with Maria. Hi, Maria.
Hi, I'm Maria Siguenza, and I am a painting instructor. I am currently a student in George Mason, and I'm getting my master's in education.
That's so cool. So Maria is going to show us how to take these blank canvases and turn them into
This is going to be a really pretty, like, ocean scene, very peaceful.
Yeah, I'm really excited. But to make it a little spicy, Jordan and I are going to be competing to see who can make the best painting.
I don't really know if you can call it competing because I'm gonna win.
So my paycheck is going on me as a bet. Do you have anything to back that up?
No.
Oh, I didn't think so.
You can bet on yourself like that?
You should always bet on yourself. Everybody, note to self at home, always bet on yourself.
Okay.
Unless you're betting against Jordan, then bet against Jordan.
Rude.
So Maria, how do we turn these into your beautiful canvas?
So I gave you guys all, if you lift up your brushes, you guys actually all have very similar brushes. One is going to be a bigger one to cover up the bigger area in our canvas. One is going to be a medium one, kind of like a little long rectangle, and then a fluffy, smaller one, and then a more pointy one for details. So when I'm talking to you guys about the brushes, that's how I'm going to be describing them. But you guys can just put them face down in your water can. And so I gave you guys the colors that you guys are going to need. And all of them are basically pre-mixed, so we won't really have to make any new colors. But we are going to go like from background all the way down to the ground for the staining. So are you guys ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. I'm excited. Okay, so you guys can go ahead, and now we're going to work on the water. So for the water, as you guys can see, we're gonna leave a little bit of room for the sand. So we're gonna draw this little thing out. So go go ahead and put your brush back inside the water, and we're going to be drawing. So go ahead and grab your second smallest brush. Yeah, the fluffy one, not the pointy one. So tap it off, and that's color that's right next to the yellow. So very nice turquoise. It's honestly the perfect shade for that painting.
Yeah.
And you're going to go ahead and do a little V line all the way across the glass.
You saw me not breathing.
Okay, you ready? All right, so now we're gonna get our paintings judged. All right,
Drum roll. It's Jordan. The sun won it.
thank you, thank you. I'd like to thank all my loyal followers and fans. You made this possible. Without you, none of this would have happened. I'm overcome with emotion. Thank you, Maria. You were a fantastic teacher. Without you, I would have never done this. So,
Yours does look very beautiful, Jordan.
yours too.
does,
Yeah, it's very nice. I
Her
like
son just won me.
Thank you.
She was hiding it for the entire time. She was like this close to it.
It was just a little mounded.
Yours is very cute.
Yes, we each have our own. Your sequels look really good.
Thank you. I like your sequels.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, now just how I wrapped up this competition and won it. Let's wrap up the show back in studio with a little bit more of discussion about our final thoughts on the book.
I love that plan, actually.
The first time she's agreed with me. Okay, so I really liked reading the book again, especially as an adult. I think that when I was a kid, I was maybe a little bit more engaged, just because the world of Imagine was so much closer. But now as an adult, I've been introduced to taxes and politics, and that kind of takes the imagination realm out. But I think that reading it as an adult definitely gave me more of a perspective on the complexities of life that Jess is just now starting to understand in the story. Overall, I think that the story was really well written, and I really enjoyed comparing it to my memories of the movie. I also enjoyed learning about the history and some of the Easter eggs that were kind of hidden throughout that story.
Okay, so Jordan, I have a lot to say about this book. You know I'm gonna have a lot to say about this book.
Let me get comfortable.
Go ahead now, okay. So I actually really enjoyed reading this book. I enjoyed it much more as an adult than I did as a child. I think one of the big takeaways was that it was a part of our curriculum, and I think for me, it was more so there was gonna be a movie made about the book. That's why I was like, okay, let's read it. But now we get a very, very full circle and in-depth look into the life of a child as they navigate love and loss and grief of a big friendship, in their first friendship, as well as some self-exploration. It was a lot more fun to read this time around, I will say. I really loved how the book framed grief and the various types of grief, and it took a very, very complex topic and made it so digestible for not only adults, but for children as well. I also thought the symbolism was very, very powerful from beginning to end, from the play on words in the title of the book. The author clearly lays out the fate of the characters, which I thought was very interesting. While the audience, us, were completely oblivious to the fact that some of the characters would not end up making it, unfortunately. So sorry, Leslie. And it was a true allegory. So we gave our pros.
But
Now let's get into some cons, okay? So this is just me, personally. And what I'm about to say might be a little controversial and a little hypocritical, but hear me out.
okay, I'm ready.
Personally.
I have my tea.
Remember that. Make sure it's hot, okay? I love how the book introduces grief in such a complicated and profound way. The literary devices are there, the plot is rich, the setting is just chef's kiss. However, personally, I do not believe that Leslie had to die in the way in which she had to die, or in general. To prove the point, I don't know, it was incredibly traumatic, and I guess maybe that's the point. Jess was grieving a lot more than just the sudden loss of his very first and only friend. He was also grieving parts of his childhood by taking on a lot of responsibilities. He had a distant relationship with his parents, especially his father. And he was about to start grieving elementary school. there was just so much more to pull from than his first ever only friend. Like, I don't know. That just seems, as an adult, I was taken aback. Yes. So I don't know. It makes sense, but it doesn't. I understand from the writer's perspective how it might appear that Leslie did indeed have to die for Jess to fully understand grief and to possibly cope with grief, and how it could appear that it is indeed essential to the overall approach of the book. Totally understand that, and maybe it was one of those things where Leslie was always meant to die. Like, from the start of the book, she was like, you know what, that Leslie girl, I'm not really feeling her, she's gotta go. But from a reader's perspective, how she died just doesn't make sense to me. Like, Leslie never went to Terabithia without Jess, and the one time she does, she dies. Like, come on, like, yeah. It was a place for them to go together and to be together. Similarly, like in the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis, the author who inspired the title Bridge to Terabithia, Lucy first discovered the wardrobe and brought her siblings. But after the fact, no longer were they in there without one another until they aged out per the wardrobe rules, and that's a whole entire different book, and we'll talk about it later. But it is an unspoken literary rule that if we venture into a new world together, we do not go alone without each other.
Yeah.
So the fact that she just goes and then she dies, the irony. And like, why couldn't she just wait? Like, what was so important that little Leslie just had to just...
Yeah, I definitely see your points in that argument, and I agree that the death that we experience in Leslie is somewhat senseless, but I think that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
So death is not something we are always prepared for. Sometimes it comes on days when we think that we're invincible, when it might be the best day of our life, like it was for Jess, when he found out about Leslie. So I think that your points about them always going together and how it doesn't make sense for them to have for her to have gone alone, I think it's kind of getting at that human experience of sudden loss and grief. So you look for explanation, but there really isn't one.
Yeah.
And I think that life doesn't always make sense, especially when it comes to death. So I think that was honestly one of my biggest takeaways from the story as well. And when we're also thinking about the story, I also like to think about the way that it ties into Virginia too. And I know that's kind of taking us on a little tangent, but I think that it's also really, I get a new appreciation for the story.
Yeah.
Especially after learning that it was based in Virginia. So the author, Catherine Patterson, she was born in China, which I would have never guessed from the story because it sounds so Virginia-based.
Yeah.
But after World War II started, her family moved around from various towns in North Carolina, West Virginia, and they finally settled in Winchester, Virginia, which is what inspired Catherine in her description of the fictional town of Lark Creek.
Lark Creek, Virginia is described as being a slow, rural town in the Arlington area, just a short distance away from Washington, D.C. While there is an actual Lark Creek, Virginia, it turns out to be closer to Tennessee and Kentucky than it is to Washington, D.C. Now that I think about it, I'm not sure of any small rural towns that are close to D.C. So, Jordan, Bridge to Terabithia took us on a roller coaster of adventure and emotion. However, the ride does not stop there.
Okay, let me strap in.
Oh, girl, let me get a snack break, a little bit of water, maybe walk around, grab a funnel cake, because the park is just going. It's just going. Our next book is going to be tugging at our heartstrings and testing romance as we know it. Our next stop is Charlottesville, Virginia. Next episode, we will be reading To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han.
Ooh, I'm excited.
Me too. I've actually seen the movie, and it was
I have not, so I get
delicious. Okay, I
a
won't
new
spoil it.
facet to look into afterwards.
I won't spoil it for you.
I'm Jordan,
And I'm Alyssa.
and remember, leave it to the pros.